I'm Peter Kavanagh. Have you ever had the experience where you believe that God spoke to you about something quite big, told you what he wanted you to do, might have involved you moving into a new role or function, a new job even, might have involved you moving location, moving house, might have involved you finding new relationships, connecting with special people or a special person, and you believe that God truly had spoken to you. And yet the outcome of it was that this new season of your life didn't last very long. The job didn't last, the relationship didn't last. It kind of all went south on you, even though you believed that God had guided you into it. I want to read you a little bit of the story of Elijah to truly encourage you that maybe you didn't mishear God at all. Let's see. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. I'm in 1 Kings 17 and verse 2. The Lord says to him, I want you to go to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have ordered the ravens to feed you there. So he did what the Lord had told him to do. He went to the Kerith ravine and he stayed there. Verse 6, the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. But it's verse 7 that's fascinating. Sometime later, the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. What an amazing set of circumstances. Now, we won't discuss how the ravens got the food to him. We'll leave that for another time. But I want you to think about how God had spoken to him. He was in a land of drought. And so the Lord said to him, I want you to go to such and such a place, and I want you to drink from the brook Kerith. This is going to sustain you. And yet we read, after a short time, and scholars are not sure how long, maybe a year, the brook dried up. Now, this is Elijah we're talking about. And so Elijah was used to hearing from the Lord. He was the prophet Elijah, right? And yet, even though God had spoken to him and told him to go to this place, it turned out that it wasn't the long-term success that he might have hoped it would have been. And I think this is so true for so many of us. You see, if something goes wrong, if you feel God has spoken to you, and again, I'll use the same kinds of illustrations, vocation, location, or relation, people that you connect with, and you felt God really told you to do this, God really told you to be a part of such and such a ministry, or you feel God really told you to move to this part of the town, or you felt that God really wanted you to get such and such a job, or be connected in whatever way with certain people and individuals, and you really felt God was in it, but the brook dried up. Here's the danger. The danger is that you'll be tempted to think God didn't speak to me at all. What kind of fool am I? Because if God had spoken to me, then the brook wouldn't have dried up. If God had spoken to me, I'd still be in those connections, or I'd still have that job, or I'd still have those relationships, or I'd still have that function, or the landlord wouldn't have said, I'm sorry, but you've got to get out in 2 months. But you see, here's the glorious thing about this story. God had spoken to him. And so when God said to Elijah, I want you to go over to, the Kerith ravine, God knew that it wouldn't be very long. God knows the future, doesn't he? Elijah didn't know, but God knew that it was going to be for a short stint. Some things in life aren't forever. Some tasks given to us by God are not forever. Some relationships that we find ourselves with, ones that we enjoy or feel refreshed by, are just simply not forever. Some places we live, we're not to live there forever. There's a time for everything under heaven. And here's the amazing thing as well. One of the reasons for sure why the brook dried up was because of Elijah. If you look at verse 1 of the chapter, it is Elijah who says, okay, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, there'll be no rain round here except by my word. You see, it was Elijah. It was Elijah's own ministry that in a sense dried up his own brook. It was Elijah's cooperation with the Holy Spirit that meant that he ran out of water to drink. Now, here's an amazing thing. In the New Testament, we read this, that when we're talking about the will of God, Paul writes this, it is the will of God that you should be sanctified. So sometimes the will of God isn't about unearthing God's secret plans and discovering, special places we need to be. Sometimes it can be like that. But we're not always in control of that. What we are in control of is our sanctification, our set apartness, our holiness, our decisions to live for God, whether it costs us or not. You see, by obeying the Holy Spirit, Elijah had dried up his own brook. There are times when we have to make a stand. And maybe that's been true for you. Maybe relationships are broken up because you have decided that you are going to follow Jesus. Maybe you've not been able to carry on working in a certain place because you have certain convictions about holiness and what's right and wrong and what's righteous. You understand? Sometimes you've had to move on from a church because it's just not been edifying for you. Now, there are plenty of people who leave a church for lots of unsanctified reasons too. But you get the spirit of what I'm saying. And I believe there might be a number of people listening to me now, and you believed God spoke to you, you went and obeyed him, but the brook dried up. But maybe the brook dried up because you weren't prepared to compromise. Maybe the brook dried up because God had always planned it to be a short season. It's inconvenient for us having to change and move and replan and worry about the future. But God is supremely in control. At the end of this story, in verse 8, the word of the Lord comes to Elijah again. Arise, he says, and go to Zarephath. I want to tell you here that God is about to speak to you again.